This episode, we're going to go over creation of taxonomies, and this is very much something that archaeologists do. We create taxonomies. So whether it be, if you're looking at what most people call an arrowhead, but archaeologists call a projectile point, that in itself is a taxonomy. The reason that archaeologists don't call them arrowheads is because most of them weren't used for arrows. They were used for darts or for spears or for things like that. So if it was a spear, the spear might be thrown, so that makes it a projectile point. A dart would be definitely thrown. If it was a thrusting spear, then whether it's a projectile point, you project it in some way. Right? So the thinking about how in the world of ghosts and haunted places, we have a taxonomy that is not necessarily unlike the kinds of taxonomies that we have in archaeology. So we're going to use the Roger Clark Ghosts and Natural History, 500 Years of Searching for Proof. We're going to use the taxonomy that he points out. This way we're seeing what is a standard ghost taxonomy. And this is on page 18 if you have this book. And then we'll talk a little bit about how this does or does not extend to haunted places. Creating a taxonomy of haunted places is something that we'll be doing in class for our discussion and activity for this week. Practicing being an archaeologist, practice coming up with taxonomies and figuring out how it's both difficult and easy to do at the same time. So in Clark's taxonomy that he borrows from somebody else and says that this is a good taxonomy, there are 8, but then he explains a little more and kind of describes a 9th one. So I'm going to say he says that there are 9 types of ghosts. 9. So 10 minus 1, 9. So number 1 type of ghosts for Roger Clark is elementals. And he describes these as almost demonic or demonic. It could be, your definition of that could vary. That is another taxonomy. Demonic entities that are ancient and therefore aren't necessarily people who have died. So more kind of primal in connecting to the world in a way that might be non-human. And these elementals can be shapeshifters, that they can come to you as a dog or a wolf one day, can come to you as a person, can be a person that then transitions to something else. And that within the ghost world, elementals tend to be connected to burial grounds. He doesn't explain why, but that is an observation within ghost taxonomy. So that's number 1, elementals, demonic or ancient shapeshifters. Number 2, possibly one of the ones that people of my generation really know a lot about because of the movie of the same name, is poltergeists. So poltergeists are not ghosts in that they aren't like a dead aunt or uncle hanging around your house. Poltergeists are described as violent energies. So if you see the movie or the sequel or there's like 3 versions of the original, and then it was remade, and there's actually a TV show which actually doesn't have a lot of poltergeists in it, but it's called Poltergeist: The Legacy. Good show, pretty good. These violent energies move things, they throw things, they hurt people, and these are generally the things that happen. The violent energies are against a person that is a living person, and usually that person can't get away from it. So if you have a poltergeist attached to you, you can move and it will follow you to your new home. It doesn't necessarily stay within the home. Now in the movie Poltergeist, it was connected to the home, it didn't move with them. In the sequel and the one after that, it kind of moves around. But it was very much focused on the young female child. And this connection to young women is something that is common within ghost stories. Women tend to be the ones who are tormented in ghost stories, especially young women, compared to young boys. So 1, elementals, demonic or ancient shapeshifters. 2, poltergeists, violent energies connected to a living person. Number 3 is your traditional or historical ghost. So these, Roger Clark explains to us, are the souls of the dead who are able to interact with the living. So a loved one who has passed on that comes back and visits you, that is what he calls a traditional or historical ghost. I don't think that needs a lot of explanation because that's what most people think of when they think of ghosts. Number 4 is mental imprint manifestations. So this is that stone tape theory. This is energy that is connected to either a place or an object. And it is that the actions that occurred in that place or including that object repeat over and over. There's a reverberation. So that's this stone tape theory, that it is that energy of what happened becomes embodied in the object or the place, and it just keeps repeating and reverberating. So mental imprint manifestations can't be interacted with, and they often appear on an anniversary day. So for example, if a rock was used to kill somebody, the anniversary of when that happened every year at the same date, wherever that rock is, there might be something associated with re-experiencing, that anybody that comes across this rock can re-experience that this person was killed. They might see it as a movie that just plays over and over, but they can't interact with it. They're not afraid of it themselves, and that it's not coming after them. Nobody's going to kill them. It's just something that you observe that has happened. So elementals, poltergeists, traditional or historical ghosts, mental imprint manifestations. 5 is crisis or death survival apparitions. This is something that there's some cultural anthropology literature and folklore literature on, that is really interesting stuff, how these stories get documented and passed on. So crisis or death survival apparitions is when a loved one or somebody who's appropriate to the situation appears to you during an ordeal. So if you were having a car accident and your aunt had passed away previously, you might see your aunt during, before, and they're, well, be careful, make sure you wear your seatbelt, or, don't worry, things will be okay. So this appearance of somebody as trying to help you, trying to get you through the crisis, is another form of ghost. So this touches on number 7, but we're not there yet. We're following Roger Clark's order. So number 6 is time slips. This is an interesting thing within the taxonomy, because time slips happen to the living person and they get pulled into another era and then get dumped back into their original time. So in some ways it's very different, because everything around you is a ghost. Everything around you is something that happened before. So this was very popular in like 1980s TV, especially family TV, when people wanted to learn about, the values of hard work and stuff. Somebody would do something and then time slip into the past where there was no electricity and learn how hard it was to live on the prairie. And then they would wake up back in their own time and they would have this newfound appreciation for what they were going through. So time slips is when a living being finds themselves in another time. If I was making a taxonomy, I wouldn't consider that within the ghosts because it's a very different thing. But I'm an archaeologist, so I'm very critical about taxonomies. So number 7, which is to me very similar to number 5 and overlaps. Number 7 is ghosts of the living. So this is when you might be experiencing something and somebody that you know or care about appears to you even though they're still alive. So I think that this might be most common in our stories about how people like twins experience the world. So if your twin is in trouble, you might suddenly see them and get this sense that you have to call them, right? But your twin isn't necessarily dead, nor is your twin going to die, but you have this strong connection to somebody that they appear to you. So this is why I think it's very closely related to number 5, the crisis or death survival apparitions, where a deceased loved one appears to you during an ordeal. So I would say that those are 2 subtypes of one type. So number 8 is haunted inanimate objects. So that's when a ghost is connected to an item and moves with that item. So if your teddy bear has a ghost connected to it and you bring your teddy bear to college, now your dorm room has a ghost with it, right? And if your roommate throws out your teddy bear, now the ghost is gone. So there's a lot of series of movies that are about these haunted objects, and one of my favorite is actually called Friday the 13th, the TV series, which doesn't seem to be available anywhere on the internet, so why am I telling you about it? But these 2 young people run a antique shop where lots of the things in the antique shop are actually cursed objects or haunted objects, and they have to go get these things and bring them back and put them locked safe away so that people don't have to deal with the problem with the ghost, right? So this is different from the stone tape theory, where an object might contain the resonance of something that happened in the past and then it repeats, because that's called the mental imprint manifestations, number 4. So number 4 and number 8, haunted inanimate objects, are again almost the same thing. You want to put them together so we can see how the taxonomy is slightly different. So in haunted inanimate objects, the object contains a ghost you can interact with as a living person. In mental imprint manifestations, number 4, you can't interact with it. You could experience it, but it just replays what happened in the past. What happened is always going to happen, always the same way. So that's the 8 that Roger Clark lists. And then he goes on to discuss something that I don't think falls into any of those 8, and that is animal ghosts. So where it might fall into the 1 through 8 is that animal ghosts might be elementals, but they might not be. So if your beloved dog died, and then you see your beloved dog, or it comes to you during a crisis, again, overlapping our taxonomy here, then it's not an elemental, because an elemental is a demonic thing, right? And your beloved dog wouldn't be a demon. So an animal ghost may be a manifestation of an elemental. The shapeshifter can suddenly become an animal, or it could be a traditional ghost. So again, taxonomy. Which one goes where? How do we organize this? So then he also goes on to say that haunted houses might be ghosts in themselves. He says on page 7, this house wasn't just haunted, it was the ghost. An ancient manorial building that had been demolished in the early 19th century in an act of spite. So something bad happened to a building and then it became an angry place. So that's very similar to something happening to a human being, and then they seek their revenge through being a ghost. So what we're going to do in the discussion chat for those who are in the course, and for those who come to the optional in-class meeting, is we're going to talk about how we can use these sorts of ideas to create our own taxonomy of haunted places. So I've asked you to read an article that is from the Nyack News, nyacknewsandviews.com, and the Nyack sketch log within there called The Legally Haunted House. So this was written by Bill Bateson in 2016. And Bill is telling us about there's this legal case that there is this house in Nyack, which is about an hour and 15 minutes south of Vassar College here in the Hudson Valley. And the beginning of the article I'll read to you. As a matter of law, the house is haunted. This sentence in a ruling by the New York Supreme Court in July 1991 generated international headlines for a real estate dispute. So there's this house that somebody bought, and then they sued the person who sold it to them because they never disclosed that it was haunted. So the law is, and this law is not just in New York, you can check your local real estate laws or call your local real estate agent and find out. But basically, if somebody has died in a home within the recent past, you need to tell the person who is buying the home or moving into an apartment that is under a lease that it might be haunted, or that, in this case, that it is haunted. So there is the nobody believes in ghosts until they are confronted by a ghost kind of sense here. But if something is a legal reality, then there's definitely got to be legal definitions behind it. And that is part of thinking about our taxonomies. So I'm going to end there. Hopefully that was a lot for you to think about and process. But think about what you've experienced, whether it be fiction or fact, whether it be movies or novels. Make a list of all the different types of haunted places and see if you could come up with a taxonomy of 10 or less kinds of places. So your taxonomy might be things that have buildings, things that don't have buildings. So cemetery versus a house. Things that are in ruin or things that are not in ruin, things that have the power of themselves to like open and close doors and retain people. So just those ideas to get you started, and share in your comments with us, what you think about the ghost taxonomy, and if you have some ideas of ghosts that aren't covered by that taxonomy. All right.